Okay. So this is the Platonic Academy of Melbourne, autumn 2024. Plato's Republic, Part 2, Week 1, What is a Philosopher? Okay, so welcome everyone. And we're starting back again, continuing with the Republic and diving straight into the philosophical section. Now, some of the people in this class may not know Owen. So Owen's a member of the board, actually, and been to a lot of classes in the past. And you've done this one before, haven't you? Yeah. Okay, so you're the expert.
I was daunted the second time.
And you know Jem now, and Tim, and we've got Karen. Karen just listens. Okay. And there should be a few others around, but maybe because I didn't send my email, no one's here. So I did schedule an email for tomorrow, which was supposed to go out this morning. So yes, never mind. All right. So kind of when we first ran this course, we really just did the philosophical section and raced through the rest, like raced through the first 4 books in the first half of the first week. And then we decided just to do the whole thing. And then it's basically a run through, except with a couple of exceptions, which Tim, you might remember, and Jem, you might remember from this time, which we shoved the imperfect societies, the archetypal governments, the discussion of that forward, and a little section about myth and representational art and stuff. That's kind of readdressed in book 10. We moved that forward. So we got all that out of the way. And so now we're just basically doing from the end of book 5, 6, I think 7, going right through, and then jumping to the myth of Earth for our last class. So yeah, it's not quite as it reads in the narrative, but it seems to work. So hopefully that's okay. Now, today and last class, I mentioned in the email that I didn't send, I mentioned about it's a good idea to do some meditation associated with this course, especially this part of the course, and any Plato, in fact, because when you read, say, the myth of the cave, the allegory of the cave, or whatever, or you read some of the other stuff in Plato, it's hard to kind of get a handle on, kind of get a grasp on it. What is this? Just, some sort of another story like some of the other myths, stories, allegories, but what are they actually about? So I had the idea that it's probably good if you haven't done any meditation to do some, and it's a fairly general prescription, because in different traditions, in Hinduism, in Buddhism, and in Christian tradition, and non-aligned traditions in the West, a lot of people do the same sort of meditation. And it's basically a few things, but it's basically to focus on being aware of your experience, that you are having experiences. And so to kind of step back from that. And one of the big ways to step back from that is to somehow subside your thinking. So if I say stop your thinking, that's actually not a very good technique to try to stop it. You have to kind of let it subside. And so that's what it's all about. So you subside your thinking, and then you just be aware, people say, use whatever language you like, be aware, and you're aware of that you're experiencing, and you're aware that you're having these thoughts, and you kind of see all that from a kind of a deeper perspective. That's the idea. So a lot of people, and it works really well, just focus on breathing and focus on around their nose, and just focus on that, let your thoughts go away, and so on. And but some people like to do guided meditations, and guided meditations can be helpful. So in the email that I just sent, one of the members of the Academy, Jerome, put me on to this Romanian guy who's now dead, but contemporary, who's actually non-aligned and had some really good published few books. And someone's put his kind of poetic writing into using it in a meditation. So it's kind of a philosophical meditation. So do meditation without any words, that's good, but it's philosophical kind of guided thing. So it's in the email you'll get when you get home, hopefully, and I might put it up on the resources page. But if, I really do whatever suits you, whatever works with you. For me, it's, okay. So, hello, Bernie here. Okay, we're coming down to get you, mate. Okay, so so guided meditation will do your own. So is anyone done much this sort of meditation before? Yeah.
Never done in
Yeah, okay. Well, there's hardly any. There's a little bit in Neoplatonism. There's hardly any guidance in that way, but a lot of people find it helpful. Otherwise, you really don't know what he's talking about. When he's saying things are shadows on the wall. What the hell, things are shadows on the wall, So there you go. All right. So so that was kind of just a long announcement. Also a long announcement is we're not doing any other weekly classes this term. So this is pretty much it, this small group. But we are doing a weekend immersion in geometry on the 11th and 12th of May, and that's certainly open to beginners as well as continuing students. No, that's all right, Joe. I'm sorry too, because I scheduled an email for 6 o'clock this morning.
It just came through.
Yeah, except no one got it, and so I realized I actually scheduled it for tomorrow morning.
It's got one.
Yeah, and I just sent it. I
was just looking for your phone number because I hadn't saved it.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that actually should be on that email. So that's another thing that I forgot. Yeah. Okay. So Joe, I was just talking about what I talked about in that email, and in the last class last week about it's probably a good idea to have a go at doing some meditation where you subside your thoughts and you become aware of your experience. Is how people how people put it.
Taking the piss? Are you serious?
No, I'm not.
No, you're being serious?
I'm serious. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Serious.
Good.
Why do you ask that, man?
Well, because we talked about meditation in the last session.
Yes, that's right.
And how there was that cult that was doing that. So now I'm thinking, are we entering into a cult now, Bernie? Is that what's happening?
Well, a lot of people do meditation, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
But no, it's more that once you get to read, as I was saying a moment ago, when you get to read this stuff that we're coming up to, and like Plato says, like, sensible things, objects are just like they're real, but they're shadows on the wall. To try to get a handle on what he's trying to say there, it's quite difficult, no matter how much I say, no matter how much explanation I give. I think it's difficult unless you have some sort of perspective on your experience, and you have you have some practice of going into an awareness of your experience, your experience of sound, and I think it's good to close your eyes, your experience of your senses, where there's no thought, and you're focusing on that. And most people I know, pretty much that's kind of really helps to be able to get a handle on what Plato's talking about here, really, because it's quite a radical view. As we get into it, we'll see it's very different from the the normal way we think about our experience, or we think about our world, our objectified world, and it's very different from the way it's understood in mainstream modern philosophy. So it's really quite alien to us. So that's a tip. And I sent a link to a guided meditation that might be good if people haven't done it before. But as I said, you can do whatever tradition you like, and it's very simply closing your eyes and focusing on your breathing through your nose is one way that people often do and find it very helpful. All right, so let's move on. What I'm going to do now is just do, we'll do a little bit of a summary of where we've got to now, because we've had this big break, and you know, we have done a lot of this dialogue already, and we might forget how we got to where we are now. So what I'll do is give a bit of a summary of that, and then we'll get straight into this first reading for this week. Okay, so I've got to go to share screen, and that's there. Okay, and let's get this one up. So hopefully, Karen, you can see that. Okay. Okay, so let's just brief overview of the books and where we've got to now. So remember, at one point he says that it's a Calipolis, it's a beautiful city, or a big, beautiful city-state. And we set about founding, he said in past tense later on, we set about founding an ideal state, being sure we should find justice in it because it's good. Okay, so, but anyway, we started with the first book, and remember what happened in the first book, where Socrates, he'd been down at the Piraeus, he'd been down at the port outside the walls of Athens, and he'd been playfully dragged, but he's walking back, and he was playfully dragged back, persuaded to go and see the rest of this festival that was going on. There was going to be a horseback torch parade, procession event, spectacle. And yeah, come back and have a chat with us, and then we'll go and see that. Of course, they never go and see that, and they get into this big chat very quickly into the question of justice. What is justice? And then very quickly into a criticism of Socrates' technique of arguing, and that from Thrasymachus, and then Thrasymachus putting up his argument that saying, oh, this stuff about being just is rubbish, the unjust life is the good life. Remember that. And so, and then we got at the end of the first book, we got, well, Plato saying, well, yeah, we've had this big argument, this big discussion. I've actually defeated Thrasymachus after a long debate. He's upset, but he's defeated. And I defeated him by a sophistic logical argument. But actually, hang on a sec, we've forgotten we haven't defined justice. So then in book 2, remember Glaucon and Adeimantus come in, and they say, oh, look, you know, Socrates, I don't reckon you made a good case there, and Thrasymachus gave up too easily. So we're going to reinforce his argument and say it's only the appearance of justice that's good. If you get all the kudos and everything, if you appear just, what's the point of being just? And so then Socrates' response is, well, the Republic, right? So we were talking more or less about personal justice and the individual being just, and whatever that means, whether it's what they do in society or what they do within themselves. But he says, no, let's talk about justice writ large. Let's talk about justice in society. So off we go, and we start developing it. We get the guardians, the philosopher-rulers, who are also the military leaders, and we quickly get into a discussion about the traditional education using myths, right? And like critical of that. And then that whole discussion about true and false myths. Myths are kind of fantastic anyway. How can they be true or false? And remember, he was saying, well, you know, if telling a story about divine being, about the divine, some of them says divine in the singular, talking about the divine or the gods or whatever, the gods are always good. The divine's always good. So any story that says bad thing, says the divine beings do bad things, or the divine does bad things, then that must be false. So implicitly, the whole of Greek mythology is just thrown out, basically. So quite a radical sort of view. And so there was that true and false myth stuff. And then there was that stuff about lying being okay, humans lying to the people, especially to the people who perhaps aren't enlightened. We'll get into that a bit more. But even also lying to, we saw the noble lie would even be told to the guardians, the lie about the story about the gold and silver and lower metals, bronze, iron people. The guardians would be told that as well, you know, by these rule makers, by the people in this discussion. So yeah, there was that discussion, and we jumped from there. Oh, hi Norman, how you going? Just reviewing where we've got to so far. So we'll just keep going. So yeah, and so then we jumped to that little bit in book 10 where he continued about the criticism of the arts, traditional arts, and he was looking especially there at the representational arts and all the bad things about that, like, you know, people imitating is a bad thing, you know, imitating people behave badly, and the, you know, something that is dramatic, you know, you say, oh, that was a bit dramatic, you know, it's talking about emotions and heightened emotions and that sort of thing. And that's not good. We don't want to do that. And anyway, representational art, like if it's pictures, you know, representing the appearance of things, or if it's a play representing people and drama and action and everything, that's a long way removed from where we really want to focus attention. We want to focus attention on the form of things, which is expressed in our experience. And then with the arts, it's only representing the appearance of things. So it's like 3 steps removed, and we don't want any of that. So it's quite a radical argument. And then we got to book 4, where, well, quite a bit happened, but especially this 3-part soul thing, where you've got thumos, spirit, aligned with reason, logos, you know, so the rational part of our mind, our psyche, controlling base desires. And this was then reflected in the structure of society. Remember how there was the senior guardians and the auxiliaries. The senior guardians had to, you know, have the logos, have to have the reasoning, and supported by the guardians who have the thumos, the spirit, or whatever else, and then they control the base desires within the general population. Okay, so yeah, so I haven't clicked on. So there we go. Beginning the project in book 2, and then we got to the education in book 3, the criticism of traditional education, and then we skipped to the stuff mainly about representational art, and we will return to the final part of book 10 on our last night. So then what's next? So then in book 5, we got to the radical view of the role of women and the dissolution of the family. So remember that was most of book 5. And so in fact, the reading today, that stops. You remember the book structure thing is sometimes a bit arbitrary. Sometimes it's nice and neat. But in this case, it's a bit arbitrary because our reading actually starts in book 5, which is a bit tricky when you're reading the blurb because it's it's a little bit at the end of the first volume here, and then that's the end of book 5, and then you go into here. But in the Penguin, they've decided to divide it.
Divided into books.
I don't know when that was. I think it would have been even after, who was the chap? There was a chap fairly early on who edited Plato's works, wasn't there? I can't remember his name now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I imagine it was quite late. I imagine, yeah, ancient times, but quite late, probably late antiquity. All right, so right, so that's where we're up to at this point. So we finished that what do you call it? Detour into talking about the family and the role of women, and now we've come back to the philosophy. But I thought maybe I would just talk through now the kind of the developing of the argument here, rather than just getting close to the books. So just so we can see why we've come to where we are. So it starts off about justice, instituting justice in society and in the soul. And then it becomes about goodness in general, you know, like that quote up there, a just society. What is it? A just society will be, it will have justice because it's good. So good is the overarching category, and justice is implicit in goodness. So then we ask the question, what is justice? And we go through some preliminary proposals, and Thrasymachus says, well, it's the advantage of the stronger, and raises the question whether justice is ever even desirable for the individual. So Thrasymachus argues that the unjust life is the good life, and that if citizens behave justly, in doing so, they promote the rulers. And remember, we compared this with Marx and ideology. Bourgeois ideology that a working class might subscribe to promotes the interests of the bourgeois. So whoever's in power, it promotes the interests of. But Thrasymachus is defeated by sophistical argument, and then Glaucon and Adeimantus are unconvinced and do the devil's advocate thing, remember? And say, well, it's just the appearance that is important and not being truly just. At the end of book 1, before that, Socrates says, well, I haven't even defined justice. So in book 2, Socrates wants to show what it is, and at the same time that it is good, the good life, by showing it writ large in society. And he imagines his utopia, his Callipolis, his ideal city-state, the Republic. So the Republic, we have the ruling philosophers. We eventually divide that into philosopher-rulers, maybe senior and guardians, and they rule against internal and external threats, internal governance, external military. In the Republic, justice is presented in social systems theory, right? Systems theory. Society is a system. A good society is a society that functions well to promote the happiness of all. It's like a healthy body where all the parts work together towards the good of all. It's also like an ensemble, you know, like a musical, harmonious musical group where everyone works together to get the good result. The healthy, harmonious social system is the just system society. The healthy society will then promote the health of the individual, body and soul. So there's this kind of mutual relationship between the individual and society's health. If society's healthy, the individual has the chance to be healthy. So this is not only about laws and governance, education and culture are critical, and that's why there's so much focus on that. You know, it's not just about making the right laws. You need to develop a good culture, all that stuff about poetry and so on. So we've got all this description, and we get to a kind of a false ending at the end of book 4. With all this outline, the end of book 4, it looks like it's all over. Socrates has described his society and how it promotes systemic social justice that promotes the justice of the individual, the healthy psyche, the healthy body, the healthy, harmonious individual having the happy life. You can only have that if you've got a just society. So it looks like it's all over. Only now there come the end of book 4, 3 big challenges, which are soon to be described as 3 big waves. Socrates will playfully say how he tried to avoid these topics by glossing over them. But Glaucon and Adeimantus playfully again, remember they're Plato's brothers, so, you know, kind of encourage him, force him, push him into addressing them. Can't get away with this. You know, you're not going to leave us now. We want to know this stuff. So the first wave, as he describes it a bit retrospectively, is the radical view on the role of women. That's a big thing, right? The second wave is the dissolution of the family. Huge thing for their society, as any society. Now, in the reading today, we come to the third wave and the biggest wave of all. Is it possible? Is this ideal republic practically possible? Like, how can it possibly come into being? Or is this just some big fantasy? If so, then what's the point of the exercise? So that's where we get to today. That's our reading today. We start with, is this possible? But before we get into that, let's have some questions, comments on reflections on where we've got so far. And in fact, I'm a bit thirsty, so I might start off the mint tea.
I might talk then.
Okay, off you go.
Well, I really enjoyed this section. I found
we haven't got to it yet. So.
I know, but I just like I have a bunch of questions. Maybe it's too early to ask them.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? I'm reading Goethe and his Italian journey, so his trip to Italy, that he did in 17 whatever, a long time ago. And I'm actually finding elements that really relate to Plato as well. Like when, like at one point in the Republic, I quote, those who can't see beauty itself can only have opinions, right? And it's something that Goethe wrote in a letter to another writer who was saying, how do I become a good writer? And he's like, well, firstly, you need to look at phenomenology almost, you know what I mean? You need to look at something, don't talk about the stream as a silvery wisp or whatever, like see it as though you've never seen it before, describe it that way. And I love seeing these connections.
Yes, yes.
That's all.
Well, Goethe reads, I'm not a big reader of Goethe, but what I know of Goethe, he reads very close to Plato.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
would you agree with that, Norman?
Cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, okay, all right. Well, yeah, hold on to your comments about today's reading for later, and we've got a lot to get through. So yeah, we can certainly get into that and then get to your questions. But has anyone got any comments about kind of where we've got to so far, what the rationale of it is, or what makes sense, anything like that before we get into it?
You look like you're about to go.
Is Tim about to go, is he? All right. We just get going into it, eh? Yeah, we're into part 2 now. So, you know, Glaucon starts this off by saying, yeah, it's all very grand, isn't it? You know, we've just, you know, got it all together, the guardians and everything's working really well. You know, it's a great city. It's just, it's orderly, it's prosperous, military, powerful, you know, it's wealthy and happy. But could it ever really come into being? Socrates goes, here comes the third wave. And apparently there's a tradition that the third wave of the set is the biggest wave. Now, have we got any surfers here? No surfers? Third wave? Maybe it is. If we had a surfer, they might agree. I don't know. Sometimes it's a bit random, I think. But anyway, for Plato, the third wave's the biggest wave. This is the most important question. So we got the first one with the women. We got role of women. Wow, radical. You know, they can be guardians too. Just train up those girls and off they go. And then the family. Yeah, we don't need family anymore. We want all allegiances to the state. And now this biggest one of all. But then Socrates says, well, but hang on. It's only an ideal in Greek, the Greek paradigm. It's only a paradigm. It's like a sculptor makes a statue of an ideal man. And I mean, we could think of like Michelangelo, David, you know, that's not modeled on a particular person, right? It's the ideal man. Well, that's how we see it anyway. Or you could have an ideal hero, a story about a hero, the ideal person. That's what you're doing. This is an idealized society. That's what utopias are, right? And that's what we would say today. But we forget, once again, that Plato's actually inventing this genre, right? So he has to define how it works. You know, this is the first utopia in our tradition. And he's inventing the genre, so he needs to explain that it's an ideal, a paradigm towards which you can aspire. That's what it's all about. So we have not failed, said Socrates, if we cannot show how to put it into practice. Still, Socrates appears a little bit defensive when he's presenting this. And then he says, well, but to please you guys, I'll show where and in what way it is possible, not exactly as described, but something similar. Socrates could show how it could be possible to come into being by a few changes or even a single change that would open the way towards such a society. And this is where we come to the idea of the philosopher king. Okay, so you might have heard of, oh, hang on, I'm still sharing screen for Karen, aren't I? There we go. You might have heard of Plato's philosopher king. Well, this is it. This is what he's talking about. You know, this is where a philosopher becomes a king or a crown prince, you know, like a prince who's about to be king becomes a philosopher. So this is how Socrates meets the third wave, and he gives an impassioned speech that this is the only way to save our society. It's the only way to save human society. Page 473D. The society we have described can never grow into a reality or see the light of day. And there will be no end to the trouble of states, of policies, or indeed, my dear Glaucon, of humanity itself. There will be no end to the troubles of humanity itself till philosophers become kings in this world, or till those we now call kings and rulers really and truly become philosophers. And so political power and philosophy thus come into the same hands. While the many natures now content to follow either political power or philosophy to the exclusion of the others, are forcibly debarred from doing so, right? People who do either one independently must be forcibly debarred from doing so. This is what I have hesitated to say for so long, understandably, right? Knowing what a paradox it would sound, for it is not easy to see that there is no other road to real happiness, either for society or for the individual. Impassioned, extreme. Okay. Has anyone got Do you have anything on that, Joe, on that part?
I actually
Yeah.
call out in Reddit to see if there have been what they thought people thought in terms of
Yeah.
what philosopher kings have existed.
Yes, yes.
And I thought it was interesting.
What did they say?
Well, we've got people like, well, the Brahmins apparently,
Oh, yes, that's
Cyrus
right.
Solomon, any lawgiver, Marcus Aurelius,
Yes.
Frederick the Great of Prussia, Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, possibly,
Oh, yes.
Marcus Tullius, Cicero, and so on. I thought it
The
was good.
Brahmins is an interesting
Okay.
one that we haven't brought up.
There you go.
Marcus Aurelius, I think we've already
Yeah, we have,
discussed.
yeah.
Yeah. But Brahmins is interesting because that is an elite class that's supposed to be wise. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that in the like the
Hindu
caste,
caste
caste,
system,
the
yeah.
Brahmins are the priests, sort of?
Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
priest class. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. I mean, it all, you know, in modern times, it all fragmented. You get
Right.
very poor Brahmins who are
Right.
uneducated and everything.
Yeah.
You meet people say, I'm a Brahmin, and they're in rags.
All right.
Mm. So yeah, that's an interesting.
That'd be the closest one.
Really?
Yeah.
But they didn't mention Tibet, well, as you suggested.
That's
Oh,
also,
actually,
okay,
Mm.
yeah, High Lamas and.
someone did say the Dalai Lama, but
Oh, they did.
yeah,
Well,
like at some point, yeah.
they're not only the Dalai Lama, there are other
The other-
lamas. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Gee, Tibet. Yeah.
When in doubt, ask Reddit.
Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay, so anyone else before we get on to the next? So it might be possible to bring on something like the ideal republic. We'll go into, he goes in a bit later into how that's possible after he does something else, by somehow introducing the philosopher king. And we will soon come to some discussion of this, but we come to this by first considering what is a philosopher, the definition of a philosopher. Have we done that yet? We haven't. We know what a king is, we've got a pretty good idea of that, but we haven't defined the philosopher. Philosopher is also defined in the Sophist, a later dialogue, in a different way, but not incompatible. But we do. So we don't know what a philosopher is. If we're going to pursue this drastic, revolutionary change to a society, which is going to save humanity, so Socrates says, and we're going to make governors philosophers, we need to know what we mean by philosophers. And this is important to us as readers because Plato will define philosophers in a way that includes what was of most of the class of what was then considered philosophers and what we consider now. It pretty much excludes all but Platonists and Pythagoreans. So we'll get to that, why that is. For it's a definition that introduces the theory of forms. And so now we begin to slide deeper and deeper into Plato's core philosophy. So listen up. This is where we now start to get into it. So hopefully you're ready, you've done your meditation and everything. Okay. But you don't have to. See how we go for this first part. So a philosopher type, someone with a philosopher nature. So he starts using this term around here, having the philosopher nature. So he's got two things, like they're looking when they're selecting, like selecting the Dalai Lama, they're looking for someone who has the right personality, the right combination of characteristics and so on, who has the philosopher nature. And then there's the education, which we're going to get into in the next few weeks. So they need, here he just says, they need to be lovers of learning, a lover of all learning. She loves all knowledge and does not shy from that which seems trivial or hard to learn. It's like the lovers of youth, like Glaucon, you're one of these lovers of youth who love youth in all its expression. It's a bit of funny dialogue around there. If you've got a stub-nosed nose, it's still beautiful and so on, if you remember that. Or the lovers of food. they're not just interested in one food, they're interested in the whole variety of foods. It's their passion. Or the lovers of wine who are interested and passionate about all sorts of wine. Right? Philosophers love all branches of learning. Glaucon says, well, that seems to cover a lot of folks. You know, there's people who go around and want to see all the plays, want to, you know, they're just taking it all in. They're just doing so much of this. They've got a great appetite for knowing about everything. Is that what you mean? Socrates, no, not exactly, but similar. And the difference of the philosopher is important here. Now, Plato doesn't use a term here, Socrates doesn't use a term here for the other group of people, okay? And so we'll get into what they are, but I think it might help us here to give them a name. So we might call them anachronistically Epicureans, right? We might also call them materialists, although that's a narrower sort of thing, or we might call them sensualists. And maybe for the exercise, calling them sensualists, you know, these people who just want to know everything, they want to, they want to learn everything, they're interested and passionate about all sorts of things. That might be a good name for what Plato is describing here. But, you know, like if you've got a better idea, let's hear it in the discussion. So the sensualists are similar but different, and the difference is important. What the philosopher loves is not youth or wine or plays or books or whatever else, but the philosopher loves to observe the truth about what is truly real, absolute reality. The philosopher loves to observe the absolute reality, the form of things. And this is where we get into, for the first time, the discussion of forms. And here we're presented with forms, formal opposites. Remember that section there where he talks about beauty as a form and its opposite, ugly, is also a form. And he says, specifically here, they are two distinct forms, right? Justice is a form, its opposite, unjust, let's say just is a form, its opposite, unjust, is also a form. Good is a form, bad, its opposite, is also a form. Later on page 479, we get large, larger, we'll see how they relate. Small or smaller is a form, and light or lighter is a form. The opposite, heavy or heavier, is a form. Each one of these opposites is one form. But when we see them expressed in particulars, in particular things, in particular actions, in particular examples, then we find a combination of forms. Things and acts have a mixture of forms. Some actions or some things, perhaps physical things, can be beautiful and just at the same time, and also small, and they can also share in the form of heavy. Some forms can express other forms. The form of beauty expresses, in a way, the form of good. The form of justice is a form of good. Now, at first, a form can seem to be multiple when it is, in fact, one. For the sensualists, beauty does not seem to be one form, but many forms, many perhaps in the particulars, like this is beautiful. It's just beautiful in its particularity. Or maybe you talk about geometric beauty and the beauty of the sunset. That's quite different, right? Or beauty of poetry or music, they're all different forms. Likewise, justice can have different forms, but not for Plato. For Plato, particular things, particular situations, particular actions can participate in these singular forms. And I come back to the very simple examples, arithmetic and geometry, which Plato tells us are the gateway. 2 cups, 2 books, 2 things, 2 marks on the board. They're all particular expressions of two-ness. Two-ness is not any particular one of them, but two-ness is one. There's only one two-ness expressed in these various ways. I draw a circle on the page, pencil on paper, right? I draw another circle. I draw lots of circles. I draw circles inside circles. I see circles on the cup, on the clock. I see circles everywhere. Every expression of the circle is a particular circle, but it expresses the unity of the circle. If I see an imperfection in the circle, I'm comparing it with the ideal circle, the ideal circle. There's only one ideal circle. There's only one ideal square. There's only one ideal straight line. Forms and participations is easy to understand with geometry. So if you get a bit lost, come back to that. Plato tells us that. When we get to the divided line, he says it very specifically, right? So it is a bit tricky with beauty. Okay, at this point, it's really tricky with beauty, and I think that's a bit of a problem here in the exposition. For Plato, particular things that are beautiful participate in absolute beauty. Particular expressions of beauty are not beautiful beauty in itself, which is one. Beauty in itself is one, just as there is only one form of two, one form of the circle. There is one form of beauty, even if we don't really know what it is, even if we can't picture it. And don't worry for now if you can't picture that. So some particular things or actions can be beautiful and just and good and circular and yellow and musically harmonious. They can be relatively big or small. They can be light or heavy. They can be hard or soft. But that particular is not the form of any of these forms. It only shares in these. Form is the essence of things, and the form is the underlying reality. Okay? So we've got the relationship between particular things and forms, and the formal is its underlying reality. Okay, so this is where we get to the shadows on the wall stuff a bit later. They are the underlying reality of every sensible object. So in Plato's theory of forms, we have the unity of the form of beauty and its particular expressions. Particular things express forms in time and space. In sensible reality, we see the circle on the page. We see the circle on the clock. But the circle itself is beyond experience, right? It's present, if you like, there, but beyond it. Okay, and it never came into being at any particular time or goes out of being. It's beyond time, it's beyond space, it's in this formal realm. Forms in themselves are outside expressions in time and space. They're invisible and insensible. And this is the key point. We need to understand this relation as we proceed. Do we understand it? Do we understand it, at least in terms of the circle and particular circles?
Are you asking?
Mm. Do we get that?
Superficial level.
Yeah, superficial level. Okay. Oh, wow.
It doesn't actually sit in my gut as a real thing, a real idea.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure about that. I know I spent more than 50 years thinking in a very I'm observing things, and what my senses tell me is what I believe in, and it's hard to get around to think about something completely different. And I think most people, if they're honest about it, I mean, most of us think about, most of us look at a tree and say it's a tree, and I know it because it is a tree, and I'm not fussed about it in any particular way. So I say superficially, I get the idea, but does it actually resonate? I'm still struggling with that.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like a simple concept like a circle, it makes sense, you know, but something like a tree or beauty, or that's where, you know, it's hard to.
As soon as the forms start mixing with each other, like as soon as it's participating in multiple forms.
Yeah.
It's, you know, there's complexity is involved that makes it hard to think in terms of this like transcendental idea.
Okay. Okay, let's see if we can make progress on that. Yeah. In this next few weeks. Anyone else? All right. How are we going? We're going pretty well. There's quite a lot this week. Okay. So this is important because we're going to use this to just, in this particular situation, we're going to use this to distinguish the sensualist from the philosopher. The sensualist loves to observe the particular. The sensualist does not even see the unity of the form behind the particular expression. The sensualist thinks that the true reality stops at the particular. Here we are describing, if you like, the materialist way of thinking. So the tree in itself, as it is, particular in itself, is the foundation of our reality, right? The materialist sort of view. So all the objects in themselves are the foundation, and maybe we can abstract, we can make statements about them, or talk about number, and we can analyze them. We can we might have abstractions from them, and that's where you get medieval universals, where you've got the material thing, and then maybe an anomalous approach to universals, which is to say that their attributes are what we use in our thinking to define it, but it in itself is their external and in its particularity. So Plato is rejecting this. And so it's obviously a very difficult thing to reject. It's an extreme thing to reject. And we totally appreciate that, I think. And Plato appreciates that and addresses it in that way when he does the allegory of the cave or whatever. So for the materialist, things are real in their particular material reality. And generalizations that we make about them, our abstractions, are our extractions on that reality. You know, the way we classify them, we count them, and so on. They're all abstractions. They're like Aristotelian universals. The foundation of the being of things that we know are in their particular expression. Materialist sensualists recognize the beauty of particular things, but they do not believe in beauty itself. They think that the being of beauty in things is in its very expression in the thing. They can't see that it comes from somewhere else. The philosopher also recognizes the beauty of particular things. So the philosopher also recognizes the beauty of particular things, yes, but does not believe that that is their essence, or that is the essence in this case of their beauty. The philosopher can see that it is only an expression of beauty in itself, which she has trained herself to see directly with her mind's eye. So she can see beauty in things, and she can see it in itself. And this will come back again and again. The discussion of forms here from page 475 relates to Theaetetus, Parmenides, and the sophist. Now, and so it is good, actually, it helps to have read these later dialogues to understand what's going on. Now, some of us have read these later dialogues, including myself. So to a certain extent, what I'm going to say here is informed by that, but I don't think it goes beyond what's being said here. It's informed by that. Knowledge has an object. Knowledge is of something. This is in here. This is continuing. That's what he says. He says, well, knowledge has an object, doesn't it? Knowledge of something totally real is knowledge of forms. So he's distinguishing now between knowledge and opinion. Have we come to that yet in this dialogue? We've come to it in a minute. Okay, knowledge and opinion. Okay, so he's coming to a very specific difference here on that. But where that which is known is only particular expressions of forms, it is only particular knowledge, if you like. I'm just playing around there a bit, called opinion or belief, dicker, right? Where opinion is mistaken for true knowledge, this is where the sensualist goes wrong. Okay, so it's okay to deal in opinion. You know, you have to in the law court, you know, like reasonable doubt, opinion, work it out because you didn't see the murder. You know, you have to kind of get to deal with opinion if that's all you've got. But if you mistake it for true knowledge, well, then that's where you've gone wrong. That's whether you're the Epicurean or the sensualist or whatever. And this is why. No expression of a form is absolutely that form. It has mixture with its opposite. This is the way he explains it here. And this is related to the Parmenides and the Sophists. It has mixture with its opposite. Beautiful objects are never absolutely beautiful, but have a mixture of ugliness. Ugliness is the other of beauty. Here we say that it is the non-being of beauty. So what he's doing here is saying that knowledge is at one extreme, ignorance is at another extreme. Ignorance has no object. Its object is non-being, he says. Knowledge has an object which is pure being, and opinion is halfway in between. It's halfway in between because, for example, with beauty, right, if you have knowledge of the beauty of a particular, then and you believe that to be beauty itself, well, you've got that wrong, because in a particular, beauty is always mixed with its opposite, and every form is always mixed a little bit with its opposite. And I'll give some examples of that in a moment. So the object of the sensualist admiration, the beautiful object, is actually a mixture of the being and non-being of beauty. So when the sensualist admires the beautiful thing, he or she is admiring the being and the non-being of beauty. This is easier to see with other forms and in other ways. So let's pause here and take a different perspective on this. Consider the notion of idolatry. What is idolatry? It's where the representative of the divine, the thing, is worshipped in place of the divine, the form, right? So it's kind of I'm kind of drawing an analogy here. What about when a priest or a prophet is idolized? The prophet of the divine, the seer or the medium of the divine, is mistaken for the divine itself, the medium for the message, worshipping the messenger. This is like seeing the thing of beauty to be beauty itself. But for Plato, the thing only expresses the form of beauty which is real in it. Yes, but it's real in it, but yes, the essence is beyond it. Now, let's consider this from another perspective again, comparing beauty with much more prosaic forms, which we come to in 479b, right? This is where he says double and half. Something can be both double and half. 2 is double 1. It's also half of 4, right? Something can be large and small, light and heavy. And so these are perhaps a little bit easier to understand. Their general form here is the form of magnitude, greater, not smaller, which is in many places in Plato. It's in the Phaedo. You might remember it in the Phaedo, where it's expressed as taller and shorter. Remember, we had Phaedo was this basketball player type guy, Simmias in between, and Socrates this little squat. And we're talking about taller and shorter. So look, I'll just have a go at going through that again, and maybe we'll try to get that on the screen. Is this tall?
Thanks.
Is this tall? Why does it depend?
Well, it depends on if I'm an ant, then yes.
Right, very good.
It depends on what you're comparing it to as well.
Is it tall?
It's taller,
It's taller.
yeah.
Right. Is blue tall or taller?
It's in relation, so 3 will say 2 is taller. And you've probably got a 1 there that's bigger again, and so 1 would be able to say, no, 2 is small.
Right. But in this instant, is blue tall?
Yes, taller.
Taller. Okay, it's taller. Why do you say it's taller?
Because it's in relation to something.
To the red. Okay. So, is blue tall?
Still yes.
It's an exercise.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not being, it's an exercise. Okay. Is it tall?
It
Talk me
depends.
through this. It
Well,
depends.
both can be true, so it can be both tall and short, because it
Right.
depends on what you are comparing it
So
to.
if we're comparing it,
To that,
it's taller then, isn't it? So tall, we're talking about taller. We
Yeah.
can't really talk about tall,
yeah,
can we?
That's right.
Okay.
Unless there is some decided objective definition. So you could say, what do we do? Anyone who is 150 centimeters or more tall, more in height, is defined
that's tall.
by the Oxford Dictionary.
Bigger than a
as
bread
being
box.
tall.
You have to make the mark. That's right. You have to, so it's all relative.
Yeah,
So can we think of anything that is not tall, is not taller?
he's not taller, well, the
Well, not
shortest,
tall in
the
this
shortest
definition.
thing. The
What's
smallest
the
thing.
shortest thing?
Wow, I don't know, a grain of
An atom.
sand or an atom, yeah. I don't-
An atom.
Sciencey.
Electron, something small.
Mm.
But how do you measure the size of an electron?
God knows.
Science people do that, right?
So it's not tall. So you've got to have some sort of absolute sort of
Yeah.
notion of what is small, but don't the physicists keep trying and looking for smaller things?
Physicists do have a definition of something cannot be smaller than Planck's constant.
Okay, so Planck's constant is the only small. All right, but potentially they could be wrong, couldn't they? And you'd find out that they were wrong. You would find out if they were wrong by finding something smaller,
Yes.
wouldn't you? So I guess we could argue, we could go to the extreme, or is anything taller, you know, like taller than the Earth, taller than a galaxy or whatever. But we're not really wanting to pay attention to that, right? So at least potentially something could be smaller.
Yeah, I had a poet friend who used to say, I am half the size of a photon.
Right.
So conceptually, at least, we can go beyond Planck's constant.
So we could pretty much say that everything we talk about is tall. Could we say that everything we talk about is small? Every particular thing. This is tall, right? This is tall against that. It's small against that.
All can be true.
All can be
All
true.
can be true,
As
Okay.
well as the universe.
no.
So, okay, so we've got taller. Anything can be taller. We've got shorter. Anything that we can point to can be shorter. Is taller like a thing? So we're talking about a form here, the form of taller. Is it like a thing? Why isn't it like a thing?
Is actually taller as a form. I don't understand maybe the idea of the form of fullness.
No.
Tall,
Yeah.
but taller.
Taller. It's definitely taller.
Taller makes more sense than tall.
Well, taller it means it's only in relation to everything else. So
What do you mean
because a
everything
form
else?
A form is there, right? A form has a being, whatever that means, that is there for eternity is always there, right?
Well, is taller always there? Come on, this is the
But-
this is the center of the problem, Tim. Let's focus right in on this. Is taller always there? Why does taller has to be a thing that's there? We're talking about taller as a form. Taller is taller, not shorter. You put the mark there, you say what we're going to say taller is 180 in terms of humans is 185 4 centimeters or whatever. Anything above that mark is taller. Everything below that mark is not taller.
Yeah.
Okay. So taller is, I'm telling, no,
Because what I said was, if you're over 150 centimeters, self-conviction will say that you are tall.
Really?
okay,
But if you, but taller, it can only exist in relation to something else.
okay, in relation, so you put a, as the example I often use, it's like people in families in their home on their wardrobe or in their
Yeah.
doorway, you know, taller might be taller than dad,
Yeah.
you know, as kids grow up, or taller might be, we're talking about taller as taller than a particular, right? So you've made the mark and you've said everything above that is taller, everything below that is, and let's be precise here because it's not the opposite form, is not taller.
Yes.
Right? It's not shorter, it's not taller because we're doing taller, we're not doing shorter. Okay. So tall, I'm telling you, taller is a form. Can you handle that? That taller is a form.
So it must be the form, a type of form that is a relation.
It's all relational. What's logos ratio? Come on. That's what it's all about, Tom. Tim. This is, I think, the heart of your problem with this. It is relational. It's all relational. It's logos, ratio. It all comes down to relational. It's not particular. It's not a particular size. It's not a particular anything. It's not particular. It's all relational. That's what it's all about. Forms are relational. They're not
So
like
are we
things.
saying the form of justice or the form of beauty is relational?
To not just, just, unjust. You cannot define just without defining the unjust. Island and sea. Go back to that one,
Yeah.
right? You say, oh, yes, I'm on the island. I rode to the island. I'm on the island. What's the island? Oh, it's the dirt and the rocks and everything. The form of the island is the island, but not the sea. The silhouette, the kangaroo on the sign, you know, we can put these slides up again, needs to have its ground. The figure needs to have its ground in order to be distinct. You've got the figure, you've got the ground, and you've got the difference in between. Physical object, you've got the object, you've got what's not the object. Clearly, my hand is not the object. The object is there. The surface is not the object, right? Because that would be the object. The surface is the difference, the distinction. The distinction between taller and not taller is the form, but it's not a particular distinction. It's not this mark in the doorway. It's not when it's not when we're talking about how many Planck constants long or whatever it is. It's not when we're saying you know, like you say, oh, that virus is a big one. You know, it's not big compared to, you know, my daughter, it's big compared to another virus. So it's not like a thing. And this is the whole problem with the way we see it and the way Aristotle interpreted Plato's forms and then basically stuffed it all up for the rest of us, right? Think of taller as not smaller. You can put the mark in the doorway. You can define it in the Oxford Dictionary. You can define it whatever you like. We're not talking about a particular definition. We are talking about taller, not shorter, however it is defined in a particular situation.
So how's
Is
that
that working?
different from just the way we use words?
Say it again.
How is that different from just what is magical about that term? The way we just use words. We use words, well, words words are difficult things because they are an attempt at describing something which is inevitably incomplete. You know, you might be able to sort of talk about penciling and be reasonably complete about that, but then you might talk about the feeling that you had as you walked down the street on a beautiful night, and the words might not quite get there, and that's where the poet comes in and uses poetry to try and get a little bit closer, or music tries to get in and just all from different ways to get a little bit closer to what it is that you feel, and words are just part of that. So what I worry about is that we come up with the words. I know logos, that's what we're here all talking about, but we're here to use words to approach something. But I don't know that we've actually and we never will completely precisely define it with
Okay,
words.
okay, yeah, okay. Do you want to go, Jan? You want
That's
to have a
the
go?
point.
Hmm?
That's the point. Is that like what Platonism's trying to achieve is it's trying to show us that like language isn't enough. And the whole issue with like that Plato is against with like the materialists, Epicureans, whatever, is the idea that you can just capture and express reality using language, that you can say this is exactly what it is. And that when you describe it, when you say, well, we've decided that based on these abstractions of the material reality, that this is what a middle height is based on a grouping of things, then that means that anything above that is taller or below that is thin. We're getting rid of that middle section. We're saying, no, we actually don't need to define the middle. And we don't need to define the group that is part of that. So in like Aristotle, you have like, you end up with these groupings like, I don't know, like if you think in terms of like societal, like you'd have the grouping of women, but then we think about it a bit deeper and we go, well, maybe there isn't just, there is women and then there is men, maybe there is like an overlap, and that overlap maybe is for everyone. Everyone is participating a little bit in man and woman, right? So there's no distinction. You're not having this group is only that thing, this group is only that thing, because we need to make, in like Aristotle at least, we need to make
These
that group
classifications, yeah.
in order to say, here's the middle. Because we can't, unless we have defined what the group is, we say the group is trees, okay? Then we group all the trees together and then we say, okay, based out of all these trees, here's the smallest one, here's the biggest one, here's the middle, taller or shorter tree, right? We're getting rid of the group of trees. We're saying it's not like, we're not choosing the group like that, and we're getting rid of the middle. We're just not saying, here's the average. We're not saying there's
Plato's getting,
yeah, well, Plato, whatever. So we're getting rid of that middle section that says, this is what the middle bit is, and you're either more or less than that. We're just saying, does it participate in this tallness? So we don't need to have these groupings anymore. We just say an object is either tall in relation to another one or short. We're not saying that it's in relation to a specific group of objects.
Elements of the group you're saying, so we're not looking at the individuals in the group and then making a distinction.
Yes.
We're literally getting rid of the group and then saying of these two objects, you have taller and then you have not taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like they're always in relation to each other,
Yeah.
rather than two separate ones being compared based on some abstraction of like, what is the middle ground?
Gotcha.
instead of saying the Oxford Dictionary definition,
Mm.
I'm forgetting.
We get rid of the Oxford Dictionary.
I must go back and check with the Oxford, ask them to delete that definition.
No, Tim, no. Well, let me just answer your first question. Thanks, Jenny, for that. And let me just answer your first question in terms of language, okay? Because that's important with Plato, right? So as Jen was saying, that it's not about language, it's beyond language. Not language is the communication, it's what we use to communicate what we know, right? And I can use language in teaching you to make, but you've got to make your own distinctions yourself, right? Okay. So we all make distinctions in the form, let's just talk about distinctions like island, sea distinctions, cup, not cup, whatever, that same other form, right? We make distinctions of things and we know them, right? And then we talk about them. We use words to label them, right? I might say, it's drizzling outside. And you say, that's not drizzle, that's rain. We might dispute it or whatever else, you know. So I make a distinction and then I label it. I mean, one of the examples I used is in scientific papers and stuff. You've got, say, some image, some X-ray, right? Or you've got the weather map or whatever else. And you've got a little account underneath, you know, like there's a cold front coming over New South Wales and it's doing this, and there's a high pressure there and it'll do this, or you've got an X-ray and you say, we can see a fracture there, we can see, you know, this, whatever else. You're giving an account. But what you know, what you experience, what it's talking about, the weather map itself that's being talked about in the description, the X-ray that's being talked about in the description of the X-ray, that is the difference. The knowledge is there, more elementary than the account. The account is imprecise and perhaps wrong because what you know goes beyond the account. The account's only pointing to it, right? So there's this stuff Jem was talking about. There is just this thing that we have to get away from, and I think this is the problem we all come to. We have to get away from thinking that forms are things. We have things, right, that participate forms. They are the form of the things. They are not any particularity. They're the form of all particularity. So a form of oneness is, you know, Nicholas of Cusa is fantastic on this. He says he's, you know, his essay, Not Other, you know, his dialogue, Not Other. The sky is not other than the sky. The cup is not other than the cup. Is that true? Of course it's true. It's self-explanatory. It's not other. And you can just go through. This block is not other than this block. Joe's not other than Joe. The camera's not other than the camera. The window's not other than the window, right? Everything that you can name, that you can distinguish, has the form of not other of one. That is the form of one. Everything expresses that you can name, expresses the form of one. That higher one is expressed in every one. It just feels a bit more profane when you're talking about one cup. Okay, it's expressed there. So we're talking about this form. The sky is not other than the sky. The cup is not other than itself. We're talking about same other, island, sea, whatever else. That form is no particular at all, right? It's not a thing. And so this nature, which is mathematics, right? If talking about mathematics helps you too, or any sort of more elaborate mathematics you know about, is nothing in particular. Right? It is something actually different. And so this, for Plato, is saying, hey, turn your mind's eye around. Look at the form of not other. Look at the form of taller, right? Because we all tend to think, oh, that person's tall. Oh, you know, and we don't even think about it. We say, oh, that virus is small. You know, it's a relative thing. And those relative things, not other, is the fairly fundamental reality. You know, something can't be itself if it's not its opposite. And it's a criticism of theology, where you say God is all, God is God, God is good. If God is good, then God is also not good. If God is good, then he can't be not good, so he can't be all. So when we get towards what's beyond same and other, can't be expressed, because everything that you name has to have that form of same and other, has to have the form of one. But the one beyond the one, the mystical, high mystical one, the form of the good, It's beyond all that. And I can't talk about it. And Plato will say he can't talk about it. So what we've got to do is when we're thinking about the forms, we've got to get away from thinking that they're like things. And so that's why it's always good to go back to some of these really, you know, this one or a circle or two or whatever else, because it's clear to us. Those ones are clear to us. And he's saying, hey, you know, slip through the crack there. Slip through the boundary that we're always using, the same other boundary we're always using, and see that that's the form of everything. And then if you keep going down and down and down, you know, you sort of think, oh, there's got to be fundamental atoms. There's got to be a material reality. If I look through my microscope and keep going down, you know, it just goes on and on and on, then flips around.
Well, then, if you get to the point of accepting the idea that a form is a recognition of a relation between the foreground and the background.
The form of one, yeah, is that form island sea form. Yeah.
Form of one is one not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, none is a better word. You know, none is a contraction of not one. None is probably better. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
One and none, or nothing.
The question is so what?
So what?
So what if, because you're just making up and just like the whole sort of turtle down at the bottom of the universe, it's just a statement that there is something out there.
No, it's not out there. It's here. It's real and present. Not out there. The form of one is present in every one thing. It's there.
Yeah.
We kind of know it. We talk about it. We talk about a cup. We talk about the cup. We talk about one cup. You know, you can't have language without singular and plural. You know, you're already using elementary arithmetic there. You're already using one all the time.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, don't say there's one. You can talk about one. You can talk about not. And as a linguistic distinction between something, one thing and another thing, right? One and not one. Or you can say this represents the form of one. Well, the form of one is something, as everyone's agreed, is something you can't see or approach particularly close. It's a pretty vague idea that with our language.
Why is it vague? You obviously can't. You can see an expression of it because this is one, that is one, and these are two. You can see expression of two, but it's nothing in particular. That's the whole thing. Forms are nothing in particular. There's no two in itself.
What does it add? How does it help us to say, not just say there is one and there is not one, but then on top of that say, and there is the form of oneness on top of that.
Why is that on top of that? I don't understand. Why is that on top of that? That is it. That is it.
In a sense, that's really banal.
Okay.
Just to say.
That's the foundation of reality. That's banal.
Well, it doesn't. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We've run out of time on that, no?
I'm struggling to find how it helps to have the form as a mental construct. How does it actually help us?
That's a good question, I think, if I'm understanding it. So if you think about if the form is something that doesn't actually literally exist, right? So we're talking about the form of beauty or the form of truth or justice. Because we've talked about how it's a form, it's something that we understand as a concept. So if it's something that doesn't exist, are we striving to reach that form? Is that what this is about? That the question I'm wondering, are you asking, is the point of this conversation that we are striving, is that our mission? Is that our purpose to strive for that form, whatever it is? Is that what we're doing? by being alive? Are we striving to create something, yeah, something that is a form of beauty? You know, Michelangelo David, like was he striving to create the form of beauty? Is that our mission in life? With all the forms? Because that sounds complicated.
I suppose, I think there's two things here we could probably address. There's the mission, I suppose, as we go on, and we can leave the rest for later, is to turn the mind's eye around and to see the forms in themselves. And in that enlightenment, to then come to a deeper understanding of what your experience actually is, And so I think what I suppose what Tim is asking for there, and you yourself as well, is a motivation to go down this path. And because you kind of need a motivation. And if you haven't seen clearly how the conventional argument doesn't work, right? And you haven't seen that clearly and how it's then fudged, then I suppose you don't have any motivation to find another way.
See how the other way of doing things and thinking about things doesn't work. I've thoroughly believed that.
Well, let me tell you the way. All I experience is my experience, right? If all I experience is my experience, then the objects that I experience must be in my experience. They must be in my experience. And yet, you know, as we did in the introductory course, and yet, in some sense, they seem to have some independence from me. They have independence from me because I don't seem to cause my tea to get cold. They have some independence from me because you seem to be able to see them too. So if all I experience is my experience, the objects of my experience must be in my experience in me. And yet they seem to have independence for these two reasons. Now, the normal Enlightenment approach is to say, oh, well, there's an object beyond my experience, unknowable and fundamentally unknown, that corresponds to the objects that I know. So the object here that I feel and is real and present in my experience actually is not real. The real object is in some sense beyond it, unknowable, unknown, and unseen. Yeah, that's Kant, right. Now that's a fudge. You know, like you found what you know. You say that the objects you know are completely unknowable in some sense and totally beyond knowing, beyond experience. So it's just like, it must be wrong. There must be another way of understanding it. Now, what seems to happen, and you know, I talk about this in my book, is that people tend to panic and think, oh my God, there's no other way. And there's no difference between the castle in the air that the delusional crazy guy in the hospital invents and scientific discussion of the real object, the real castle itself or whatever else. So we have to institute it because there can't be something there can't be appearance without anything that appears. So you jump and make this leap. Right? We do this in the introductory course. Initially, what they did was they said with Descartes and then even with Locke, although he hides it, he says, well, we don't know the object itself, but we know God and God is good and God would not fool us. So the object must be there. Locke does that as well. Kant says, oh, well, it's not that I'm not religious, right? But that looks like a fudge to me. And then he invents this metaphysics, which we can discuss, which somehow institutes the object. But in Plato's Platonic view, he doesn't do it. He can't do it because all I experience is my experience. The objects must be in my experience, yet somehow they're independent. How does this work? They don't. In Platonic view, Kant hasn't solved the problem. Locke hasn't solved the problem. Descartes, it's just a fudge. They're using, yeah, okay. So you're motivated to find another way of giving an account of this thing.
That's what I'm here for.
Okay, good, good. So that's why it matters. So Plato's saying, okay, think about the circle. Think about the relationship of the diagrams that, we'll get to this in the divided line next week. The diagrams that the geometer draws of the circle. Say, draw a circle, right? An idea about the circle. Is it just an idea in my mind? Is it just an idea in your mind? When we all die, will there no longer be circles? Plato says no. It's in this reality. Tunas, the circle, everything is in this reality. And it's the gateway to solving this problem that I just presented. That's what Plato says. So there's your motivation. But as he says in the cave, and we're jumping ahead here, you stand up, you look around, you're all confused at first. You're all confused, right? And other people, when you start talking about, oh, it's not like this, they think you're mad, right? And so then the idea is it takes some time and effort, it takes some gazing at the fire and then at the sun before you then come to see how it's not just the circle, it's everything. And I mean, in a way, we can see that with physics. There's a Platonic account of modern physics. It has to conform with, and therefore for Plato, it has to express mathematics. If it doesn't express mathematics, famous problems, right? In quantum physics, whatever, problems because they don't make sense in terms of arithmetic and geometry, right? Physical reality expresses, and experience in general expresses their forms. Physics shows us that. Physics is based in a way on that, although you might give an account of it in some other way. So modern mathematical physics, which of course was invented in the academy by Eudoxus. So yeah, I don't know, does that help?
I have a Buddhist friend.
Yeah.
Oh,
by the way, hang on a sec. We probably should finish the recording and say goodbye to Karen if she wants to go. It's only Karen. So see you, Karen, and we'll see everyone next week. We'll continue with the just for the people watching the recording. We'll continue with the with this week's reading. We haven't got through it, and hopefully get to the divided line also next week. We haven't got as much content next week.